Y is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
So this week's episode is part one of my conversation with Leslie Cavendish, Beatles hairdresser.
Who I need right now because I look
Wait,
like
wait,
alfalfa. You didn't even
wait,
call me out on
wait.
this.
No, I should have. I'm sorry.
Yes. Look at you're
Um,
failing because you're tired. You should go on tour more often.
exactly. But there will be a part two that you will be a part of.
This is what you tell me.
And I was looking at his website when I
Hmm.
first, and I can't believe I didn't mention this to you earlier.
Mm.
Tommy Thayer read the book and loved it,
Whatever.
amongst all the other people who gave quotes about it.
Mm.
So yes, Beatles hairdresser Leslie Cavendish on the show today, part two coming soon. Thank you for listening. Now, let's move to happier occasions, or let's move to things you're doing without me.
Mm.
Yes. So you did the full sauna cold plunge.
I did.
Okay. So let's spend some time on you.
Oh, you're so sweet.
I um well, what's the story? How was
Okay,
it?
it was awesome,
Okay.
actually.
You didn't have a heart attack. You didn't.
I didn't. Now, in fairness, when we do this, we probably will have heart attacks
Yes.
because my cousin who's done this a couple times, who I did this
Hmm.
with, did say when they did it before, the extreme, the temperature was a bit colder for the cold plunge
Hmm.
because the weather is quite warm right now.
Right.
And the cold plunge system was a bit different this time. It wasn't circulating as much, so it wasn't, you had to keep putting ice in it. So it didn't stay I mean, it was still cold,
Right. But
still
a
very
cold
cold.
plunge in June versus a cold plunge in January.
When it's like 85 degrees at 10 a.m.,
Right.
not quite as extreme. But I
Yes.
will say we were far more equipped and like we were kind of liking it where other people maybe not. We did better than a lot of people. We like
Okay.
stayed in there longer than everybody else. Let's just
Oh,
put it that way.
show off. So,
Well, I think it's because we grew up in going from a hot tub to rolling in the snow, going back into a hot tub. I think this is just
oh,
how we're
all right.
wired.
All right. Got it. Okay. You're better than the rest of us.
No, we're not
So,
better. We're
how
just
does this,
weird.
so give me the whole walk rundown.
Okay,
I
so
was
the
going to say
way,
walk down, but no, we're going to run down
yeah,
this
the
off.
way they did this here and the way they apparently do it around Michigan, which
Okay.
first of all, what I didn't know, in
Yes.
Michigan, you can rent a sauna
What?
that will drive up to your house
Wait, what?
and that you can have it for the weekend. And it sounds like you can rent a cold plunge you can have for the weekend. So we can just rent these.
Okay, when we do our show live from hell, Michigan,
Freeze miser, heat miser.
right? It can be hotter than hell, and then it can be cold as ice.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm in.
And we'll like play all of the music, obviously.
Hmm.
Yes,
Will,
we're gonna do this.
will we
Well,
get robes?
we if we don't have robes for that,
Yeah, we've done
well,
something horribly wrong
right.
in a past life.
Well, we have, which is why
Yes,
we ended up together. But
right, true. Okay, good
um,
point.
but maybe this is how and we will have Jean Sauvé as our robe steward
Jeez. Okay, keep going.
and
Oh,
Sandy Stone as our stone mistress because you have to like feed the stones into the
okay.
sauna.
Oh, all right.
Look at we have
Sure.
jobs for both of them.
Yeah, this is perfect. Okay, so
And Randy will be Randy.
just be there,
She'll just be there,
looking confused.
telling us how it's good for us. So, okay, so you pick which one you want to do first.
Okay.
And the way they did it was you go with your small group. You can actually have up to 7 people in the sauna at a time.
Okay. Which one did you choose to go first with?
Well, we were very polite. And there's smaller, they were less,
Yeah, first time for everything.
I know,
Okay.
there were
So
less
you,
cold plunges than there were saunas because you're supposed to stay in the sauna longer.
mm,
Most people can tolerate it longer. But most people were only there in twos, so you really could we did even time in both because we
okay.
were rock stars. And so the you go in the sauna and it's like an actual sauna, but it's a trailer, but
Right.
like a horse trailer size, but you
Right.
go in
Wood or
wood.
wood. Okay.
And and then I was, as I do because of my fear from both Heart to Heart and Charlie's Angels,
Hmm.
where people get trapped in saunas and almost die because the killer, that's how they
Yeah.
escape. I had to make sure I could get out, and you can. There are windows. Even though it does lock from the outside, I did see
Hmm.
they could have trapped us in there, but they didn't. We could
But
have
you
broke.
didn't like leave a door open or something or
No,
crack. Okay. Okay.
no, no, no.
So
I
there's
did
no heat
not.
leakage.
No, there's no heat leakage. But there are windows that we could break if we had to.
Okay.
So, but we'd have to be in our best form to shimmy our way out of the, but we
Right.
could let the heat out that way.
Exactly.
So you go in there and you sit in there, and
Hmm.
then when you're done, you get out, and then you get in these tubs, which basically looked like giant Rubbermaid containers,
Hmm.
and it full of ice water, and then they pour ice on top of you, and you sit there
Hmm.
for as long as you can, and you have to get all the way in. The
Right.
more submerged you are, the better. And
Hmm.
really, but I mean, we were really tall, so every time my cousin got in, it was like a flood over the
Right.
thing,
Now,
which was great.
um, couple questions for this.
Mhm.
So where was this location? Were you like out in the woods in the no middle
No,
of nowhere? No,
no, we
you were
were
in a
not. We were
parking lot
actually,
at a strip mall in Detroit.
I wish we were.
Yeah.
No, we were in a parking lot though, but at a very lovely yoga place, which I would love to go to because it's the best yoga place I've seen since my yoga place closed, but it is his yoga place, and I can't
Mm,
do that to him.
yeah, you don't want to. Footwear. Do you wear something?
No,
No footwear. Okay.
but you wear a bathing suit.
Yeah, so you don't scandalize the people at the strip mall
I mean,
coming out of the shop right next door.
right.
Okay, so it's in groups of twos that you're sauna and
Well,
cold
we
plunge?
did, but some
Right.
people, you can go up to seven.
So they have 7 tubs to
Well,
cold
they
plunge.
they didn't, but because you pre-register, so they obviously knew based on the people going. People were going in groups of two.
Gotcha. Now, how many okay, so were you in your own sauna? Do you have a private sauna and then your private cold plunge
You have
or
your private cold plunge and the sauna. You sit together,
okay,
but we were like you're with your person that you're with or your people we were with. So we
right.
would do the cold plunges next to each other, and then we'd go in the sauna together.
Okay. Did they do the Agush thing with the okay, nobody was beating you
No,
with
so we'll
leaves or
have to.
anything.
We'll have to.
Okay.
That's what Randy can do,
That's what Randy will be doing. Yes. And I'm sure she will put her
and
full
we'll get her the hat too.
she will put her back into it, let's be
Hmm.
honest.
Oh, she
Okay.
definitely will do that.
How long did you sauna for?
The first time we did like 13 minutes.
Okay. And then you walk out, and because you're trying to climb into a Rubbermaid recycling bin,
Hmm.
it's not like a run out, jump in as if you were in the fjords or something like that.
No, but it wasn't.
No.
It wasn't bad. It was pretty easy.
But you've got heat coming off your body. I guess what I'm trying to say, there's
Correct.
heat coming off you while you're waiting to get into your
Your bin.
shipping
Your
container of,
yes, of
right.
ice
Okay.
water.
Yeah.
And so we decided to make it more difficult because the first time there was ice in there, and then we realized it melted fast. So then we decided that we were going to get in and then pour the ice on afterwards. And
Okay.
so, but then we took my cousin, who was very gentlemanly and polite, and let people go ahead of us. But then he thought it was better we should pour the ice on after we got in. So we started pouring the ice on afterwards. But then we took it upon ourselves to realize that everyone else should want the ultimate experience like we did, and they
Mm,
should want it colder too. So then we took it upon ourselves to wait to put the ice in until they got in too, which maybe wasn't what everybody wanted.
you didn't ask, you just did.
Well, no, we're like, we're going to pour the ice on, so it'll be
Mm.
better for you. We asked,
Right.
and we're like, do you want that? And they're like, oh,
But you were like wimp, like you kind of,
kind of.
yeah, all right.
So they were like, yeah, sure, okay, yeah, that's great, yeah.
This is lovely. Thank you. I feel so much more alive.
And they did.
Well, yeah, you
They
got
did
those,
feel better.
they got 2 giants looming over them, pouring ice on
It's
them.
true. I mean, we are Swedish, so
Now, the ice, where did it come from? Were there just a lot of little trays of it somewhere?
no, it came from
Okay.
your local party store, as all soda ice comes from.
Oh, okay. So sauna ice is the same ice you put in your cooler.
Right. It
Okay.
was in a giant cooler. I mean, this is like,
Right.
I mean,
Top-notch
this sounds
sauna.
like the sauna actually is very top notch. The cold plunge was not as like
Listen, no one's
hardcore.
perfect. Yeah.
But I think it was when they had it before, it was like it was very like what he said was it was very like top notch, had a whole system and there was a whole thing. So I think something must have maybe because of the weather, I don't know. The cold plunge was a bit different. But
Right.
I'm telling you, I've had like the shittiest week, as we know.
Yes.
And
We'll bring the court reporter in to read it back so
right,
we can all relive it.
yes,
Yes.
yes, please. And it continues to be shitty. And
Hmm.
I like looked like shit. I mean, I still look like shit, but that's because I haven't slept. But I feel like I gained 10 pounds. I look like I gained 10 pounds in a day. Like it's not me being like, oh, poor me. Like it's legitimate. I, after that hour and 20 minutes,
Hmm.
I got out of there and I have not felt better within 5 minutes in 10 years. Like it was
Wow.
unreal
Okay.
how
So you
great I
just
felt
you sweat and cold plunge the Sauvé right off you.
right off of you.
Okay. All right.
Like
Well,
I
that's
felt unreal. Like it was
okay.
so good.
Were you allowed to bring a beverage with you? Did they provide beverages? Do they recommend beverages? Or because of the heat and the cold, they say, like, don't,
Well, they recommend water. They don't recommend Rose Kennedy's and,
or the
tequila
Guy
sunrises.
Fieri fruit punch?
No, they don't
Okay.
recommend like breakfast cosmopolitans on the veranda.
Espresso martinis? No.
No, those are. I realized that that
This is a
cosmopolitans are
story.
no cosmopolitans are a breakfast drink
Okay. And espresso martinis are
after dinner.
okay. Didn't Sex and the City teach us nothing other than Cosmos or like a brunch breakfast drink?
Well, I was drinking cosmopolitans before Sex and the City, so by the
Oh,
time I watched that, I was
we
over them. I
know,
didn't drink
we
them
know.
anymore. I just rediscovered them, and I decided that they were for breakfast.
Okay.
Whatever. The
So
whole world has decided that Carrie Bradshaw is a terrible human being now. I've known I was a terrible human being my whole life.
Well, there you
So,
go. We're proud of you.
I mean, Sherman, Rachel, and I are like, yeah, please, we've always known that.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
She knew that when I was 13.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
I mean, I feel like your life has been a series of just sort of like that idea of the one train later. Something could have happened and gone a different
sliding
direction.
doors.
Yes, I mean you're working for Vidal Sassoon and then Jane Asher shows up and the person who usually does her hair isn't available. I mean, that in and of itself is a pretty nice afternoon, I would guess.
Yeah, it was a very nice afternoon. Unexpected to the point of I didn't expect her to turn around and say, "Have you got time to cut the boyfriend's hair?" And that was really what was unexpected. Doing her hair, I've been washing her hair and probably for 18 months. So
Hmm.
it wasn't as if she was a stranger. Getting to do her hair because of Mr. Roger couldn't have time to fit it in was a bit of a surprise because he was the senior artistic director of Sassoon's. So
Hmm.
he was high. He was on par with Sassoon, and normally you would expect. We all knew that having a boyfriend, come Paul McCartney, come girlfriend in the papers every day. That when it came to the crunch, is she going to trust somebody who's just started, or is she going to go to the big boy? That was what surprised me uh, more than anything, because when she said to me, "What are you doing in the afternoon?" Again, I did have it in the back of my
Anything
head.
you want.
What do you mean? Have you got time to cut the boyfriend's hair? I was taken back because I knew who the boyfriend was. I didn't go, "Oh, you mean Paul McCartney?"
Right.
It was like, yeah, I've certainly got time to cut the boyfriend's hair. It flowed into that in my head. I was thinking, is she serious? Am I going over? She has been to cut Paul McCartney's hair. So yes, that was a sliding door moment. Again, I couldn't tell anybody.
Hmm.
The only person that knew. The whole point of everything was to keep your mouth shut, keep quiet. And that was certainly something I was not going to say to my football friends, which I was going to guess where I'm going after football, you know. So I kept it
Yeah.
quiet. Yeah, that was a sliding door moment.
Do you think that was part of the thing that both she and then the Beatles responded to, your ability to just hang out and sort of be normal around them? Because I'm
Yeah,
assuming they are surrounded
yeah,
with nothing but
yeah.
sycophants,
One
you
of the
know.
thing, one of the things that how can I say? I don't get what's the word? Stage struck. I don't,
Hmm.
the only people that really have made me sort of go, oh wow, is professional boxers. I've come across a lot of them in my life. My one part of my family ran the boxing in the East End of London, and I got to meet the big guys personally. Muhammad Ali, Zora Folly, and people like that who I was really interested in. My background, my father and my grandfather loved boxing, and I used to watch them. Those were people I sort of went, oh, wow, I'm actually in the presence of somebody like that. Or I'd meet my uncle, who was a very famous jazz drummer, and he was in a band. They started a group called Ronnie Scott Trio,
Hmm.
very famous.
Yeah.
He played with, he's back then, Fitzgerald. So I used to go to the clubs and sort of met him. You know, musicians normally are ones that would also get me, but this was a hairdressing situation. This was not going to go to, it wouldn't be like, oh, can you come over this afternoon? Paul's having a concert. We'd like you to come.
Right. Bring your
It's a different
scrapbook
ballgame,
and
right?
yeah.
So for me to go over there to cut his hair was something, and it was all he made me normal. He made it normal. I got to be honest with you.
Hmm.
I think had he come into the salon, that wouldn't have been normal. First of all, he would never have got through the doors. Everyone would have had been looking at him, and there would be people around. But being in his own home and not having an entourage around him, in fact, there was no one around it. Jane was not there. It was only the housekeeper. Made it normal. And when somebody says to you, I've heard about you, would you like to come and have a cup of tea? And you're sitting down in someone's front room, that's quite nice for someone to do that. And
Hmm.
it made me feel very normal. And again, I never sort of bothered, with him regarding, oh, I've got to get his autograph. Or we didn't have cameras. Had I had an iPhone at the time, I probably may have succumbed to can I have a photo taken with you? But because we didn't
Hmm.
have the iPhone, I don't want to. I'm not going to ask for his autograph because that's what everyone would do. I'm not even going to sneakily pinch any of his hair. It was just a normal reaction, and what made it normal was when you're sitting down having a cup of tea, something. I mean, I'm looking at you now, and I can't help look at your hair. Right, I just look at your forehead above it. I do that with everybody, and the side bits are nice.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm looking at McCartney's hair thinking, how am I going to do his hair? And in between everything else, and when I finally came to it, I just said to him, how do you want your hair, Paul? And he said, do it as you see it, which again makes it much easier for me because there's no one there saying, well, I want a little bit short hair and can you leave it there? It was just normal. Everything was normal. Went upstairs to the bathroom. Um, I washed his hair in a little tub, where you put your teeth in, put water.
Hmm.
It's in a mirror that big. This was not somebody who was trying to be a star and wanted, snap your fingers and do it right. Everything was just very normal, which made me very relaxed. He was obviously in another, it's all to do with timing, Luke, because it was 3 weeks after the Candlestick Park concert, which was the very last concert they did. Actually, it was just under 3 weeks.
Wow.
It was the first time that he didn't have to be a Beatle. He didn't have to be putting on Chelsea boots, putting on his shirt and tie, putting on everything, looking like the Beatle or looking like they did in 1964, 65, 66. The press conferences, getting ready for a concert. This was him at home 2 weeks later, putting his feet up, unshaven. Must have been a great relief for him. And there's someone around pampering him in a strange way. There's something very nice about having your hair done. So, yeah, the whole
Yeah.
thing just fitted in very nicely.
That's insanely trusting. I guess he knew they're just going to be hanging out at Abbey Road from then on. So if you gave him a bad haircut, who's going to know the other three guys, and they're just going to make fun of him.
Well, yeah,
So
this, except that one, yes, yeah, exactly.
worst case scenario, like,
Could be.
yeah,
There was a scenario where that only after I think it was just the second time I cut his hair. So it's not as if I'm well into, being his personal hairdresser. I did say to him, I haven't seen Jane for a while. She hadn't come into the salon. And he said, no, she's filming. And I said, just because you are not playing anymore or doing whatever you're doing, I suppose you've got time to go down and see her film. I think she was filming Alfie at the time with Michael Caine. She was down in Bristol anyway. And he said, no, I can't do that, unfortunately, because Jane's an actress. He didn't tell me that, but, Jane is an actress. She wasn't a girlfriend. She wasn't a model. She's a serious actress, trained by the old Vic, Shakespearean actress. He said, they'll only talk to me about the Beatles if we're going to get back together again. And during the course of me doing his hair and everything, I said, well, that's a shame. I said, I suppose when she's finished, you'll go on holiday with her. And he said, no, I've got the same problem. And I just came out and just said, that's a real shame. I said, why don't you go in disguise? And he said, how? Now, picture this. I'm talking to him in a mirror, holding his
right.
hair, and he's saying to me, how? I don't know how. Except the first thing that came to me when you hold someone's hair, I said, why don't I cut all your hair off? And he said, like what? I said, why don't I cut it that short? And he said, go on, do it. So I did it. And I cut his hair, not from the front, from the back, obviously, because it's a bit of a shock. I did all that. Anyway, his hair was that thing. And you get back to what you're saying, if he'd gone to Abbey Road and think his hair doesn't look good. My problem was, what about if Brian Epstein had an American promoter and turned around and said, listen, Brian, I'll give you $100 million for the Beatles to appear in 2 weeks' time there, and there's Paul McCartney with a skinhead haircut. That was what I
Oh,
was a bit wary of.
thank God they had Beatle wigs. I mean, it's I want and I it seems like that sort of like sympathy or just connection on a, oh, well, why don't you do that? You can't do that. How about like that sort of human normal interaction you would have with anybody is the thing that kind of got him being like, all right, well, you're not here for an autograph or to sweep up as much hair as you can and sell it all because I mean 66, you're pretty much in the thick of Beatlemania at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
So you could have made some good money off the hair.
I got offered.
Yeah.
I got a phone call from the guy that owned the hotels that the Beatles swam in the swimming pool. He rang me up and he told me that he's bottled the water, John Paul, George and Ringo water. He's cut the bed sheets up. John Paul and Ringo slept here. And could he have some hair to complement it? I told him in a good old English way to off. So yeah.
What was that reason to just completely shun all of that? Was it just a feeling of like, I don't want to take advantage of this? Or
There's a
because
certain
clearly
other
there was,
thing, you don't often get chance. You take your chances in life. If you're going to be a footballer, who do you want to play for? You've got Man United, Liverpool, Real Madrid, right? Are you going to be good enough to play for them? No. But the ones get through, and when you do, you make sure you stay with that team because they could win things.
hmm
If you're doing ladies hairdressing, which I did start off, which I branched off into the men's hairdressing side of life. Who's the champions if you're going to cut men's hair? Would be the Beatles.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, and I often say it, I didn't want to cut a single. I wanted to cut an album. It's so easy to just cut it once and said, yeah, and got an autograph and got a piece of hair, and how wonderful that would have been. Meanwhile, I let it last. I pushed it for 6 years, or maybe a little bit more actually. But the thing is, I'm a bit of a groupie when it comes to music as well. So,
Hmm.
what do I want out of this? I want to watch the Beatles rehearse.
Yeah.
Can I please come to the studios? I went to 3 different studios and to watch the Beatles rehearse. That was a buzz. I didn't need to sell out anything at all. That's memories that I got at the time. Again, I never told anybody. Um, it was just an exciting time. Again, I knew it wouldn't last forever. So
Hmm.
make the best of it what you can. So yeah, that was the reason. I got that. I got that. Yeah, I could have sold. I mean, he did offer me money. This guy, the promoter.
Yeah.
Um, and I got many times when I was used to go around to McCartney's house in John's Wood, or even in Savile Row. Many a time, after a while, the press get to know who you are, and they often come up and give you a little bit of a. Can you give us a story? Can you tell us anything different? Give you a few bob to tempt you into something. Yeah, it's there. I'm not one for a goody goody, but this was something that I didn't want to blow, and I was accepted, and it was nice, and you get invited, on the Magical Mystery Tour films. You don't go there if you're going to start blowing secrets around. So yeah,
Yeah.
to me it was a good gig.
And so you were still cutting hair the whole time of people at the salon. You were still there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the Magical Mystery Tour kind of put an end to that.
Well, not really, because what happened was after the Magical Mystery Tour, the Beatles went through a phase of. I mean, it's a lovely idea. They went through this hippie phase of, um, we'll help you. Instead of going to the bank, we'll bankroll you. Right
Right.
now, the Beatles bankrolled so many people that ripped them off. But one of the bankrolls was that they went into clothing and designed clothes. They got somebody called the Fool who made the most beautiful exotic clothes. Um, but they cost about probably cost you $2,000 for a jumper. It just wouldn't work
Hmm.
for the average public. But they spent a lot of money doing that. George Harrison was very friendly with a guy called John Crittall, who designed most of the jackets for Brian Jones of the Stones and Jimi Hendrix, Rod Stewart, and people. He had a shop in the King's Road called Dandy Fashions, and they decided to buy that shop. And they asked me after the Magical Mystery Tour if I would like to front the salon. They would like to open in the basement a hairdressing salon for me, and they would finance it. So we'd have the two together. We'd have the hair downstairs and the clothing upstairs. So yeah, that was just another extension of what happened when I was with them there. So yeah, so from that on, I got lots of new clients. It was all it was fun. It was good. It was right, and I lived opposite. It was in Chelsea on the King's Road, and my apartment literally was a 2-minute walk. So yeah,
Perfect. So by the time you were on the Magical Mystery Tour, you had cut uh, John, Ringo, and George's hair at that point. So you had a relationship with all of them
I
one
had a
way or
relationship
another.
with all of them, more with Paul the most, and probably with George a little bit because uh, John, I used to cut George's hair at the salon, at the private salon, made sure no one was there and whatever,
Hmm.
and that was nice. You used to be able to talk to him there. Paul was at home. Ringo's wife Maureen was a hairdresser, so she made sure
Oh,
his hair always looked good. I did his hair for Ringo for The Magic Christian, written by Terry Southern.
hmm.
I was down at the studios there for a week. Um, and Lennon I used to do at the Apple offices, when I used to do it. So yeah, I got to know all of them. I felt comfortable when I was in that circle of the four of them just to keep quiet and watch. There wasn't sort of, oh, get him out, or there were a few of us. I was probably the only London boy. All the others were from Liverpool, so they used to wonder what this London boy is doing there.
Yeah. Well, and so Brian Epstein dies right before Sergeant Pepper, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
I believe. And so Magical Mystery Tours is sort of the first time that it seems like retrospectively the cracks started to show and the sort of power dynamic in the group starts to shift and things are not as tight and as neat maybe as Brian would have had them be. When you were on that bus when they were filming that film, did you get a sense of that, or was it just everybody was kind of off doing their own thing?
Very strange. Number one is, I got an invitation. I was asked to go round to Paul's house, and while I was there, he said to me, what are you doing in the next couple of weeks? Actually, just before that, when I went round to Paul's house, Brian Epstein had just died.
Hmm.
Okay, 1967. I was round there 3 weeks after, or 2 weeks after Brian Epstein died. And when he told me that they're going to go, what are you doing the next week or two? I said, why is that? He said, well, I've got this. He was telling me about this tribute. A guy called Ken Kesey took
Hmm.
the psychedelic bus around America,
Pranksters, yeah.
and then he combined that with the days out to Blackpool, where they were in Liverpool. People go out on their coaches, go out, down to the seaside. And he said, we're going down to the West Country, which is Devon and Cornwall, with the 4 other guys there. We're going to do this film. Would you like to be part of it? You could do our hair at the same time. I thought it was a bit strange, 2 weeks after Epstein had died, but as they
Yeah.
said, and as it's the old saying in show business, Brian would have loved it. Brian would have said, let the show go on. So they did. What I realized then, because they weren't touring everywhere, Paul seemed to be in charge. I called Paul the conductor of the Beatles. Now,
Hmm.
people take that, not me, but take that Paul is like the leader and the busybody there, and he doesn't let anyone breathe there, and he dictates everything. You've got to understand one thing. Paul McCartney's house, which is in London, St. John's Wood. St. John's Wood is a 5-minute walk to Abbey Road Studios, called at the time EMI Studios. So let's put this scenario. He's with Lennon or whoever he's with at the studio. They've written a song. They've played it out. They've done a demo, whatever. John's gone home. All three of them live down 2 hours plus out of London. Beautiful country houses in Virginia Water. For them to come up to town would take 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Now, if you're sitting in bed around the corner, you've written a song, and you think of something, what's he going to do? You've got to get up in the middle of the night or go there early in the morning, go into the studio and start changing
Yeah.
it around because you're there.
Right.
So he was in complete, he was there and he's also writing songs as well. It's his baby with Lennon. And so when I went on the coach, it was a bit of a mismatch. It was Paul was on the bus first. That was a whole big scenario anyway. But time we picked up Ringo, or the other 3, if you know the film, Ringo sits in the very front with his Aunt Jess,
Hmm.
and Aunt Jess and him are screaming and shouting the whole time. So whatever script they had, they either improvised or that was their bit. Paul was with the director, writing things down and talking to him. So they probably had an outline of a script. I was sitting a lot of the time behind Lennon and George. They sat together a lot, and they seemed a bit bored. I must be honest with you. Now, I don't know whether they wanted to do it. I didn't know if they were grieving for Brian Epstein. I got no idea. But they were looking a bit bored. They didn't participate much in what was going on. They seemed to let Paul do whatever he was doing.
Hmm.
But when we got off the coaches anytime and the four of them interacted, or two of them interacted, or three of them, whatever it is in the film, you saw a band. You saw people that have been glued together since 1959, 60, 61. And you suddenly saw that sort of magic, because there wasn't any bitching going on. There may be bitching going on in the studio. I just saw, I don't agree with this, or can we play this? So this is two technical things for me because I'm not a musician. But
Right.
that would be normal thing to do. And again, when they were all out, they were very hospitable to the people, the fans. You know, this wasn't the screaming girls that would rip their hair out and chase them and do everything. Yeah, these were still young girls. They gave their autographs and things. They did it with the waiters at the hotels, and there was a really nice feel about the whole thing. There was no problems on the coach. There was
Mm.
no, oh, he's in a bad mood today or whatever. You spend a week with someone there. Yeah, to me it was like, yeah, okay, I can see why you're successful.
Yeah. Well, and they at that point had become, I mean, the fact that you can just say John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and everyone pretty much in the world knows exactly who you're talking about. And as they can almost become caricatures of what they were. Was there any point in your friendship with them in cutting their hair prior or post Magical Mystery Tour where you were sort of like, oh, that's not actually what they're like? That it's not, Lennon's personality is not Lennon turned up to 10 or Ringo turned up. You know what I mean? Like that the outward character that they are is not actually who that person is one
I
on one.
think, yeah, I would certainly think that John was probably the most complex one of the lot.
Mm,
He was going through, um, he was going through a marriage, divorced, got a young son,
yeah,
uh, met Yoko. That caused a little bit of friction. One of the rules I understood was that the ladies of the Beatles didn't come to the studio or didn't
right.
interfere. I can remember going to a studio called Trident Studios where they did Hey Jude, or rehearsed Hey Jude. I remember an occasion. Again, I kept it quiet, but there was Lennon leaning against the wall with Yoko stroking his hair. I think, or if it didn't happen, I remember Paul saying something to the thing of, "What do you think of this?" Maybe it's a note he played, I don't know, or a lyric, I don't know. And he said, "Yoko, what do you think?" And that, to me, was like, oh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. That one does. But again, you don't say anything. But then I went down with John and Yoko to another studio called Olympic Studios, which is in Barnes. It's where Led Zeppelin
Yeah.
recorded all their stuff. And I took my dog down there. And the reason I took my dog down there, and this was another side of Lennon, which was humorous. He had some great humor, Lennon, which I really know for a fact through another situation, a hair situation. But my dog had this I had mentioned that my dog, when a guitar plays really loudly and that really sound, used to howl. Just go, "Ooh," like that. He did. He honestly did. Funny you should say that, Leslie. So does Yoko. So what
So,
happens next? I go down to the studio and there's newspaper reporters there. And I remember, and they said, "Why are you bringing your dog here?" So I said, "Because he's doing backup vocals with Yoko," which he wasn't. But I did just say that.
right.
That was John. John had that sense of humor there.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and I got no idea how I ended up down there, but there was my dog, and I got it. The funniest thing is that I've got these in print. So these are in the newspapers. So when I wrote my book, like 50 years later, plus, I had all these newspaper cuttings, and I've got a newspaper cutting where it says, my dog's name was Ernie, and I actually dedicate my book to my rock and roll spaniel, Ernie, the biggest groupie ever. And and they said, why are you here? And I told him why. And he said, really? He said, and then he got into a scenario where I had a guy called Larry Curzon who ran the office, or one of the major agency, just forgotten the name, but he had Diana Ross, Elvis Presley. They were next door Apple. And he became a really good mate of mine. And he said, we'll get publicity on it. So we got the news. We got the Daily Express newspaper, big publication. And we said, the reason why my dog sang with Yoko is because I look after his vocal cords, and we feed him smoked salmon and honey, and we massage it into his face. I'm telling you, that's what I said. I've got it in print in the newspapers. That's what they wrote down.
Just zero questions.
No questions, just really funny. So yeah, his personality was, I loved it. I 2-3 times with him, I could have got onto the bad side of him through his hair. If you want to talk about it at all, but I told him he was going bald. But there was a situation. Very quickly, I got asked to do an interview about the texture of the Beatles' hair, and there was a client of mine, and she was the chief writer for the Disc and Echo newspaper, biggest next to Melody Maker in London. And she said to me, could you tell me the texture of the hair? So I said, yeah, Paul's is fantastic. I could do a lot with Paul's hair. Ringo's hair is thick, maneuver, and his wife Maureen looks after it. And George's hair is long and flowy, and it's really lovely. And she said, Lennon's? I said, yeah, it's okay. Well, that was the first mistake I made, wasn't it? And she said, oh, it's just okay, is it? So I said, yeah. So she said, well, what do you mean by that? And I thought I was probably a bit too cocky, I was to myself, thinking I knew it all. And I sort of said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, if we just put it 30 years later, probably Lennon would lose his hair first, wouldn't he? And I said, well, I don't know that. And then she made me say possibly. That's what she got out of me. I said, well, possibly. And we left it at that, and no problem. And the press officer of the Beatles, a guy called Derek Taylor, and you couldn't get an interview with Derek Taylor unless he approved, right? He rang me up and about 8 o'clock at night and said, Leslie, what have you said? And I said, I don't know, what do you mean? He said, yeah, it's in the newspapers tomorrow morning and on the radio tonight that John Lennon's going bald, said the Beatles hairdresser. And I said, I didn't say that. And he said, well, you better sort it out. Following day, I got up early, and when I got the newspaper, big headlines on the front page, John Lennon going bald as Beatles hairdresser Leslie Cavendish, right? Picture there, open up.
Perfect, yeah.
Thing. Great big pictures of all this interview. I get a phone call from Lennon. Now, to be told that you're going to go bald, to read about it, you're going to get bald, it's not very nice, especially somebody's doing your hair. At least ring the person up and say, by the way, you're going bald, but
right.
It's a polite thing to do, isn't it? And he rang up, and I thought, here we go. And I started to say, John, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. And I was just blurping on, to be honest with you. But all I did say was, but John, they took me out of context. And with that, he just said, don't talk to me about effing context. He said, look what happened to me. He said, I told her that we were bigger. They thought I said we were bigger than Jesus Christ. And so he said, I totally understand. So I went, whoa, wow, he understands. And then he turned around and said, listen, I need to know something. I said, what is it, John? He said, am I really going effing bald? I said, no, you're not. He said, well, come over. And I had to go over to Savile Row and check him out, So he could have turned there. So that was Leonard, and I do understand that he could have been very sharp with people.
Yeah.
George I never had a problem with George. Watched him in every movement, whether he was stoned or not, or whether he was in that meditation world of his. He was very peaceful to be around and interesting to be around, especially when I used to have him in the salon. My conversation, I don't just sit there and not say anything there. And, I mean, what are you doing? And he did say to me, he's got this guy, Ravi Shankar, and he's trying to master the sitar and everything, which was interesting. And then you suddenly listen to Blue Jay Way on Magical Mystery Tour and whatever. And then Ringo, not so much, because his wife, I said, was a hairdresser. So, but I saw Ringo on the film set down in Magic Christian. I've seen him on a few locations and things. He acted quite normally. If I would say out of all the four of them, he probably was the least I had contact with. But there was nothing there that I would see that I felt that maybe I shouldn't be there, except actually on one occasion. One of the things I wanted to do is go to Abbey Road to go and watch them play. I had no watch them rehearse. I had no idea. I just thought, what a buzz to go and watch these guys rehearse and see how they interact. But when I was there, I remember seeing that there was Ringo was on drums and Paul was, they had a 4-track at Abbey Road, and Ringo was on the drums there, and there was George Martin, there was Jeff Emmerich, the engineer in there. He was the engineer, and I was sitting there with another guy, and and obviously everything's being fed through the microphone so you can hear them talk. And I remember hearing Paul going, "No, not like that. No, I told you, not like that." The next thing, he's sort of looking, what's he talking? I know what he's talking about. And then he goes over and he snatches the drums sticks out of Ringo's hand. It just went like that. I said, "No, like this." No, I did. Now, number one is I never knew Paul was a good drummer. Number two is I was a bit shocked to see that happen.
Yeah.
And Ringo didn't like that, not to me, and told us to F off.
Right.
Get out, get out. But I found out loads of times later that was an everyday occurrence. Paul does that. So there were things like that. Now, I could have so easily gone out and just told the press, "You never guess what I just saw,"
Yeah.
But Ringo was fine on that, and Paul was, Paul was going through a difficult time because he was obviously very happy with Jane until
He wasn't. Yeah.
until there was you. And then there was someone else that popped into his life, who she was caught, a young lady called Schwartz. What's her name? Nancy Schwartz.
Ooh.
And Jane came back, found them in bed together. That was the end of that relationship. But
Fair enough.
Then he met Linda. So the whole pattern sort of fell in, and he became automatically a stepdad.
Right.
Little baby Heather. So yeah, and he was the most calmest. Again, I saw more of him than anything, and I watched him go through a lovely, loving relationship where she looked after him. She got rid of. Strange thing is, she got rid of all the people, these hangers on, who whatever went on. And I get a phone call from. I used to get these phone calls from Mal Evans or Neil Aspinall, the two road managers who moved up a little bit, except for Mal. Neil used to run sort of part of the Apple company, and he said, "Would you go over to Cavendish Avenue?" Which again is my surname, which is a bit of a bonus. I said, "Oh, okay." And I thought I'd only cut Paul's hair not too long ago. Said, "Okay." Linda wants you to cut her hair. Really? Blimey, okay. So again, she had sorted something out, and for reasons, whatever, maybe I was trustworthy enough to come over and do it. So that's how that relationship started with Linda and Paul. So, it wasn't sort of, I'm there every week or every 2 weeks, but maybe once a month or something, or you want your hair cut, it would be, call Leslie, come over anytime. So I used to, it was a very trustworthy thing that I had with them. And as I said before, I didn't want to upset the balance.
Cutting Edge, the story of the Beatles hairdresser who defined an era by Leslie Cavendish, is available from barnesandnoble.com or from his website, BeatlesHairdresser.com. And if that isn't enough, Leslie offers private Beatles-themed tours of London, which look amazing. For more information, you can email him at info@BeatlesHairdresser.com.
Why the Podcast is produced by the Professional Production Company. Please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts because we're shallow and need constant validation. For more information, you can check out our website, whythepodcast.com. And like everyone else, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Today's show was recorded and produced by Heidi Hedquist and myself from our world headquarters, located on the second floor of the Professional Office Building, centrally located downtown. Our reluctant executive producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our intern is Zach Jackson. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Flash, we're coming home.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?